Well, perfect. This has been a really fruitful discussion. It's already been an hour. I think we could go for many more hours. And I guess I would just kind of recap what we're trying to do. Uh, the biggest pain point we see right now, that's kind of the low-hanging fruit, is surgical robotics are not time competitive with manual surgery, at least that we're aware of. And we think that the obvious elephant in the room is registration and then placing arrays into bone. We think those two elements introduce a lot of time, hassle, fiddle factor that, if removed, would certainly help drive adoption. And then the second thing we think is really going to become an important area of focus, especially as we try and generalize outcomes, and take just listening to, for example, Dr. Romero talk about how he plans executes actually to the laxity that he wants. I mean, that's a lot of skill, and that's not generalizable. And so how can robotics take that skill and automate it, and as Doug said, kind of take a surgeon who doesn't have that ability and give them that ability? And so we have spent a lot of effort thinking about the laxity accuracy, right? For whatever you planned intraoperatively to match whatever you got postoperatively. And I think that, what I'm kind of hearing is, well, that's kind of a squishy number right now. And it would be very interesting. And, I'd be interested if this is something you guys would be interested in just kind of looking at with various systems on the market, is what is the actual laxity accuracy? Because it's all we've been talking about in the literature is bone cuts, and the way you derive the laxity is completely different in terms of just the math behind it. And our system's actually accounting for the biomechanics of the knee and those sorts of things. We're not so sure that's happening, but it's purely anecdotal at this point. And we think that as we move to an automated world where the target maybe will start to crystallize, and that target might not be, a mechanical target, but something closer to what, maybe something between the mechanical and patient specific. And we don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but that's really where we think the outlying pain is in the industry. Is the solutions today just rely too much on surgeon skill and leave too much to the surgeon to figure out, that, as Cameron said, a computer could probably do very well. And so that's really our focus as a company, is to solve the time problem, which basically helps the economic arguments of robotics, right? If a surgical robot increases the throughput for a hospital, that's certainly a significant value add. But what about making the surgery actually easier and taking some of this thinking out of it? So I guess that's the final thing.
You got to look at surgery in ASCs, because that's more so than surgery in the hospitals.
Yes.
Because it's going to come to a point where every joint replacement done in a hospital is losing money.
Yep. Exactly.
Right. It's only the ASCs are going to be the healthier patients, the better surgeons, the faster turnover time. So that's where this thing needs to be directed.
Exactly.
And not to the hospitals.
And Dr. Jamieson kind of brought up the footprint. One of the beautiful things about thinking about novel tracking is, most systems on the market today are kind of using one of two major tracking cameras, and generally speaking have a secondary tracking cart that takes up a lot of room. When you look at the footprint of kind of the current state-of-the-art systems, they're really having a tracking camera that is sort of separate from your robot cart or whatever is doing the cutting or the jig is not an efficient footprint for the ASC. So there's a lot of opportunities, we think, to really iterate. And I guess my final comment would be just a question for everybody. Do you think robots are, where would you say we are in the life cycle? Because the biggest criticism we hear for Monogram is that we're late to the game, and that, now everything on the market is basically just kind of an iterative me too. And I'm kind of curious if you think we're late to the game, or if you think there's really an opportunity for a company to kind of go one layer deeper and think about the real problems here.
So the first time I used the Monogram robot, I thought it was a much better robot than the Mako robot that I had been using. It's a second or third generation machine, and robotics is going to keep developing.
I think for me, I think one of the things that I always joke about is that big companies is where technology goes to die, right? So I've actually used every robot on the market. Currently, I use the Velis robot mostly because I do a lot of work with DePuy and their implants. And there's a lot of things that are good about it, but I had this conversation with their director of technology and all these things. I said, this is the iPhone 1, right? I mean, this is truly the iPhone 1. If any of us took the iPhone 1 now, we'd probably have a hard time even knowing how to turn it on, and does it have the finger thing or does it not? I don't remember. But if we looked at the iPhone 15 when we had the iPhone 1, it would have blown us away. In my mind, Monogram truly is this iPhone probably 4 or 5, when everybody else still has the iPhone 1. Mako's still an iPhone 1. Velis is still an iPhone 1. I think Zimmer's is iPhone. The Rosa's iPhone 1. I think some of these other ones, these handheld ones, really aren't necessarily robotics. I think my feeling is, when we go back to when you talk about the trackerless guidance systems and the registration, I think that Monogram has to come in with those because nobody else has them. We have to do something different. Otherwise, all we have is a robot that cuts bone. But if you have some of these other technology pieces that come into it, in my mind, we come in at an iPhone 5 and an iPhone 6 or an iPhone, whatever it is, that's different than everything else that's on the market. And that's where the genius and the beauty is for me with Monogram, is that we have that ability to revolutionize robotics and orthopedics in reality. I think that this conversation scratches the surface on what we could do.
The bone cutting is probably the least important part, right?
Totally right. Yeah.
Everybody can cut bone.
Yep.
But
totally.
But we can't do customized implant placement without a robot.
And guys, how important, like how valuable do you think a system that can really enable the placement of custom implants, like how valuable is that to you?
Take that away, Dr. Romero. I saw you had your hand up.
Well, just to answer that question, because I also want to answer that question. I think that is the future of what we do here. I think if you ultimately can quickly and efficiently make custom implants, we may be able to solve the amount of issues that come with knee replacement. If it can be cost efficient and you can make custom implants quickly to fit each patient's individual anatomy, then I know for a fact it will require a robot to do it well. And, I think that robotics has a lot of value in distorted anatomy, complex anatomy, revision cases. And you need something that's good to do it in terms of robotic performance. Now, going back to the earlier question, if we're late to the game, I'd say that, yes, other people have had their foot in the door first, but it doesn't mean that we can't be a big innovator in the field and move the needle. I like the idea that this is a smaller company that has ears listening to the suggestions from people that are doing the surgery day in, day out, every day, from a variety of different robots. I also have had the opportunity to operate with 7 different types of robots, and I see advantages and disadvantages to each of them. And I can, say with confidence that your robot is far ahead of the game than the vast majority of the other ones that I've already seen. And, you think about a company like iRobot created Roomba. They've been around since the early 90s. Well, now Roborock has come around and make their own robotic vacuum, and they are sort of the premier best reliable, highest rated review thing that we're currently using. I mean, I own 2 of them now, and I'm just impressed with its capabilities. So if you look at what's mainstream and what's well known, you have the big name players in orthopedics, Stryker, Zimmer, DePuy, but it doesn't mean that what they have is better than what we're trying to do here. Everything can be improved upon, and whoever can improve upon it the fastest and produce a good result that is reproducible, easy to integrate, efficient, and reliable, that company is going to win and take over an industry that is going to revolve around robotics in the future. That's my true opinion, that robotics is going to be what everyone is doing ultimately for joint replacement. And I think it's important that we occupy space and we do it well.
And
Thank you.
my fear is actually that people stop learning how to do manual total knees. I mean, I don't have residents, but I worry to a certain extent. I mean, I had a robot the other day that somebody tripped over the cord and unplugged it, and I had to bail to a manual after I'd made, my distal femoral, my posterior chamfer cuts. So my concern, I really think robotics is going to be the future. I assume that most of the training facilities are getting robots more and more and more. I think it's hard to tell, a surgeon or a resident, hey, we're doing manual knees today. And you guys, that work with residents can answer that better. But my worry is there's so many, like, the robotics ends up being in every single OR that people forget how to do a manual knee.
And I think for the foreseeable future, residencies should require that there's training in manual knee replacement and robotics. And I can't see a training program just solely relying on robotics, or it would do a great injustice to that person for the reasons you said. Technology can fail and has its issues, and you can do so much better with technology if you understand what things are like without it.
It's tricky to do that though, Joey, because who then decides,
Yeah.
Who then decides who gets a robotic knee versus who gets a manual knee. If robotics is that much better, are you doing a disservice at some point to the patient? Like, how do you actually execute that plan?
I just think history has been unkind to people who refuse to accept that, like, creative destruction is a part of economic reality, right? Technology is intended to come in and make complex tasks simpler, cheaper, safer, and that's really a positive thing for humanity. And all of you are incredibly smart people that would find opportunities where it's really less, let's say, commoditized, where the solutions are not there for robots or for technology. And I think it's really exciting seeing surgeons who embrace technology, because I feel like a lot of times those are the surgeons who really care about patients and outcomes, and they're not really thinking about they're trying to really push the ball forward in terms of understanding what matters. And I love having this discussion, thinking about even like challenging our assumptions on what the perfect target is. Or I think it's really key for humanity to move forward. And ultimately, I think where sometimes companies lose their way is they lose sight of the person who matters in the room, which is the patient, right? And everything we're trying to do is enhance the outcome for the patient ultimately. And so
surgery is a technology field, right?
It's a technology field, exactly.
All surgeons have adapted to technology, but a lot of surgeons do not change after they finish training, because change can be hard.
Yes.
Right. So, and we have to accept that not everybody is going to change.
Yes.
On that note, Dr. Adler, how do you feel about the learning curve of Monogram system compared to other systems? I remember Dr. Romero, the first time you used it, you mentioned that this is the safest system I've used, right? That was kind of part of the whole design that we had and I remember Dr. Adler, once the first time you used that, so I could have pressed this pedal in New York. I didn't have to come here to press the pedal.
Yeah, and then we did it.
And we said, okay, that's a good idea. Let's do it from New York.
Yeah, I thought it was very easy to learn, but I I thought the Mako was very easy to learn, and I didn't think it took that long to capture those 40 points. And I've had junior residents and fourth year medical students that I've pretty much let do almost the whole operation, and I think they do it better than I did it my first year in practice. Right?
Yeah.
It just didn't take that long.
But yeah, the learning curve is not the learning curve of running the robot is really not the issue. It's especially as we get away from simple mechanical alignment. It's the planning. It's the
Yeah.
tweaking that plan and figuring out how you want the soft tissue to be and considering all the variables, all the permutations. That's the part of the surgery that I do. Is
Mhm.
the plan and the conversation with the reps and tweaking the plan, and that's what we think can really be automated, because that's
Yeah.
actually what takes time,
And
It takes
requires
time,
skill.
and you got to pay those people.
and you got to
Yeah.
pay those people. Yeah,
Well, and I think
and you're
the
not
other,
thinking of necessarily every variable.
yeah. Well, I think the other part of that is that there are the actual carrying out of the plan isn't. I think that most robotics. I think you're right. I think that most robotic systems are fairly easy to be able to do that to a certain extent. So, I mean, the great thing about this conversation with the surgeons that are here is that what we're trying to do is take what really isn't. The carrying out of most of these is pretty easy, right? So it's like, all right, what are the things? How do we help people? We're going to the next layer already, and that's what I'm saying is like we're not late to the game, because the game is continuing to be played over and over, and the final buzzer hasn't sounded on robotics. I mean, we are still moving. I mean, again, who carries a BlackBerry today? Nobody, right? But if 15 years ago, there were a lot of Blackberries out there, right? And everybody
Right.
thought, well, BlackBerry's the key. Now nobody's got one, right? So I
Yep.
think that these conversations, it's such a layer of an onion, where it's like, there's those guys, and I think that this group and groups like us have to be the very center of that onion and saying, okay, how do we make it? How do we go to the layer above us, and the layer above that, and the layer above that, and the layer above that, until we get to that outer layer? And that outer layer is really the surgeon who says, hey, I don't really want to know, or I don't know how to do all the details of the plan. In reality, I'm not sure what happens when I do this or that. But we have created a robotic system that really they don't have to know that. All they really need to do is, hey, you walk in, the rep says, this is who you are. Everything else is pretty much done for you, and off you go. And you got to get a great outcome.
Yep.
Yeah. So
Agree with
Dr.
all that.
Jameson, I guess like in closing and maybe for the team, why do you think, our sense of just the industry is, I think there's a lot of people who find what we're trying to do very frustrating. And I think for, Doug, myself, Cameron, we're kind of sometimes left scratching our heads. Like, why do you think the industry it almost feels sometimes like they're reluctant to see new people trying to do things in orthopedics, or trying to innovate, or like trying to go the next level and say, hey, look, maybe bone cuts are good, but what about laxity? Where are the studies on this? Thinking about the next level problems. And it seems like it can be difficult to get traction in this industry, and I'm kind of wondering what your feeling on that is. Why? What are the hurdles that we need to try and overcome on that front?
And you're talking about from industry, or you're talking about from surgeons?
From industry
Yeah.
generally, it seems like it's just so difficult for small companies in orthopedics.
Yeah, I think some of it is people have to think outside of the box, and most people aren't paid and aren't good at thinking outside the box. So, when you look at something and you say, well, we've got Mako, or we've got Velis, we've got, ROSA, why would we need anything else? This thing works fine. And even when I've had these discussions with J&J, I'm like, well, what's our next thing? What are we doing next with it? You know, or what do you guys, what's your plan for 2.0 or 3.0? And they don't have one, because what they're trying to do right now is sell robots, right? And I think that that's where small companies, and even when I have conversations with a lot of these, and you look at the industry, most of these robots that are bought, Stryker didn't develop Mako. J&J didn't develop, DePuy didn't develop Velis, right? I mean, the people who developed these robots and then got bought were the people that were thinking outside of the box, and that's what Monogram is. I mean, we're the next generation of thinking outside the box, and how do we make what we have better?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
A lot of the world hasn't moved away from the mechanically aligned knee yet.
That's it.
Well, that's it.
That's really it.
That's exactly it.
That's exactly it. And
it'll take a little while, but it'll get there. But a lot of the world hasn't moved away from it yet.
But that's the question: is that once it becomes like well proven that some type of personalized alignment is better, it seems pretty clear that to achieve that, you need some kind of technology. And that seems to be the tipping point to me, is that once it becomes kind of essential to do personalized alignment, you know, you're going to basically force, I think, people to use technology.
I mean, basically, just to say in a nutshell, our investment thesis is that personalized alignment is the future. It's where it's going. We think it's beyond obvious in the literature. And to do it well, you need a CT scan. You need to figure out what to do with the osteophytes. And you need to make planar cuts that are accurate in both the coronal and sagittal planes, because you need to accurately estimate where those implants are going to be touching, the contact points, and you can't do it if you aren't accurately cutting. And then you need to know where the implants are actually sitting in the bone. And we think that matters, especially as we move to a world where surgeons aren't all as skilled as you are. So that's our thesis, what we're trying to do, in kind of a nutshell.
Yeah. Well, we'll get there.
Yeah. Well, thanks. You know, we really appreciate everybody, you know, and we're excited to see all of you soon as we kind of get to the next phase here and show you more and more of what Cameron and the team are working on. We're working really hard. I think what we have is pretty exciting, and it's not easy. It's a very hard problem. But Cameron, anything you would say, kind of in closing on that front?
Yeah. So we are very excited about, and a lot of companies say this word, but we truly have done a lot of work. There are a lot of new technologies that we are developing that will show up very soon. The purpose of this meeting was just to give you a glimpse of some of them, and we are going the direction we're going. We're going to be solving these problems that came up during this meeting very soon, and through very efficient means. What I really like about our team is that we are on the clinical side, the surgeons are an integrated part of our team. We are not developing an engineering solution. We're developing a clinical solution for a clinical problem. And this is something that the whole team really embraces. And we continue to listen to surgeons and continue to develop the technologies that surgeons need.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, thanks everybody. This has been great. Anybody have any closing comments before we all sign off?
Just thanks so much, guys. I know everybody's got a busy schedule, and it's a Saturday, and Dr. Adler just got off a ski slope, so we really appreciate all the input and just the great conversation that we had.
Yeah, I want to have many more of these.
Yeah, this was good.
Appreciate everybody.
Bye,
Thank you so much.
Okay, bye.
Talk to you all
Thanks.
soon. Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.